Welcome back to Even Tacos Fall Apart, your go-to podcast for real talk about mental health, struggles, and triumphs. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today we're diving deep into a really neat topic, and that's healing through fiction. Before we jump into the episode, I want to take a moment to remind you all that you are not alone. Whatever you're going through, whatever you're facing, whatever battle you're fighting, there's a community here that cares about you. So if you're listening to this right now, I want you to know that you're part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of a tribe of warriors who are fighting their own battles and supporting each other along the way. When life gets tough, when the weight of the world feels like it's bearing down on us, sometimes we just need an escape. And for myself and many of us, fiction can provide that escape. Whether it's diving into the pages of a beloved book, getting lost in a thrilling movie, or immersing ourselves in a captivating TV series, fiction has a way of transporting us to another world, if only for a little while. But here's the thing, fiction isn't just about entertainment. It's a powerful tool for healing. It's a mirror that reflects our own struggles and triumphs back at us, allowing us to see ourselves in the characters we love. It's a reminder that we're not alone, that our experiences are valid, and that there's hope even in the darkest of times. And that's what today's episode is all about. We're going to explore how fiction can be a source of comfort, inspiration, and even empowerment for those of us who are struggling with some challenges, including mental health challenges. We're going to be talking to Janina Scarlet, a leading expert in the field, as she shares her insights into the therapeutic potential of fiction and the importance of representation and diversity in storytelling. This interview was recorded way back in 2021, so consider it a blast from the past. And as you listen in, I hope it can be a reminder that the conversations we're having today have really been brewing for years. And I also hope that you'll find that they are way more relevant now than ever before. So grab your headphones, settle in, and get ready to explore the power of healing through fiction. Because sometimes, all it takes is a good story to remind us that we're not alone in this crazy journey called life. Hello, welcome back to another Mental Health Monday. Welcome on in, those of you who are here already. Super happy to have you, really excited for this. Oh, you know what? Can you make sure that your captions are on? Maybe it's on my end, yep, actually. Okay, let's see. Yep, there we go. Okay, it was on my end. Of course it was. That's okay. Mine are going, yours are going, chat is showing up. I'm not way over here. I mean, I still kind of am. It's fine. I guess I could scoot this over some more. It's good enough. Good enough. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. Our topic tonight is healing through fiction. I'm really excited to be talking with Dr. Janina Scarlet. So if you guys aren't familiar with what she does and all about her, I've got some social information for you. I've got her Twitter, her tags page, her superhero therapy website, and her Instagram. So if you want to check her out on any of those, make sure that you go do that. Dr. Janina Scarlet is a licensed clinical psychologist, author, TEDx speaker, and full-time geek, which, yes, we're here for that. A Ukrainian-born refugee, she survived Chernobyl radiation and persecution. She immigrated to the United States at the age of 12 with her family and later, inspired by X-Men, developed superhero therapy to help patients with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. She's a recipient of the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award by the United Nations Association for her work on superhero therapy. Her work has been featured on Yahoo, BBC, NPR, Sunday Times, CNN, CW, ABC, The New York Times, Forbes, The Nerdist, BuzzFeed, and many other outlets. And I have to take a breath in the middle of that sentence to get all those out there. She was also portrayed as a comic book character in Gail Simone's 7 Days graphics novel, and currently works at the Center for Stress and Anxiety Management in San Diego. She authored Superhero Therapy, Harry Potter Therapy, Therapy Quest, Dark Agents, Superwomen, Supernatural Therapy, Super Survivors, as well as numerous contributions to Star Wars psychology, Star Trek psychology, Wonder Woman psychology, supernatural psychology, and many other books. So if you got a fandom, essentially, it sounds like she has it covered. And thank you so much for agreeing to be with us here today. I'm super excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
And for those of you who are here, we do have a question queue. I'm going to go ahead and open that now. If you have a question, feel free to put it into the chat, !Q, follow with your question, hit enter on your keyboard, and that'll put it into the queue. So I do watch all of that, and just make sure that if you have something that you want to ask, that you pop it in there. So the first question tonight is just, can you tell us a little more about your experiences and kind of what made you become interested in specializing in mental health?
Sure. Honestly, I've always been interested in people and people's stories. I grew up in Ukraine where you can't go a few feet without seeing some kind of a World War II memorial or a site where there was a concentration camp. And I grew up around people sharing their trauma stories. And I found it deeply moving just seeing the kind of courage that people had, the kind of, just deeply traumatic events that they went through and how it shaped their lives and how it gave them a different view on life. And so it's something that really drew me to want to work with individuals who have trauma. And as a trauma survivor myself, it's something that I became really, really passionate about. And now this is what I do. I work with folks primarily with PTSD, although I also see people with anxiety to help them overcome these, usually through the use of fiction of some kind.
That's neat. I always ask this question because it's fascinating to me, first of all, how any of us get to where we are in our lives. Like by the time we're adults and we have chosen a career and gotten there, it's always interesting to find out what got you there and how. But especially with people in the mental health field, it seems like it's typically really super related to something that they went through themselves or something that they observed someone else going through. And for you, it sounds like it's a little bit of both. That's fantastic. Cod says, I'm a combat veteran getting my doctorate in org psychology. See, listen, it's something that you've gone through. Oh, Cody, listen, I get names wrong too many times to count, but hello. Thank you for being here and thank you for your service also.
Thank you, Cody.
What is your favorite thing about working in the mental health field and what have some of the biggest challenges been?
Honestly, my favorite thing is being able to work with people. I know it sounds silly, but that's what it is, just being able to learn about someone and learn their story. And I feel incredibly honored that people are willing to trust me to share the most painful moment of their life with me. And it's really moving to see the kind of changes that they start to make and the kind of meaning that they very often discover. And I personally believe that every single person I've ever worked with is a true real life superhero. And so it's pretty amazing because I get to work with just the most courageous individuals because they're facing anxiety and trauma on a daily basis. And it's just, I couldn't think of anything more rewarding.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite book that you love to read? I mean, I know that you've written a lot of books, but is there a favorite book that you love to read or a podcast that you love to listen to?
Oh, great question. Well, I am a big Harry Potter fan. I do not support J.K. Rowling's stance. I am a big trans rights supporter. But I do really like the Harry Potter series. I'm currently reading the Shadowhunter series by Cassandra Clare. I'm really enjoying those. But I think one of my favorite series of all time is Neil Shusterman's Scythe. I think it's one of the best books I've ever read, one of the best books ever written.
I love the Neil Shusterman stuff. I'm going to have to disable these light commands because unfortunately there's a bot going around just following people all willy-nilly like crazy. So give me just a second.
Okay.
I can just do this. And the light will stay on behind me, but it shouldn't flash whenever we get followers and stuff. The Neil Shusterman stuff. So I read through all of the Unwind series, like that.
So good.
I mean, like fast, fast, fast. And then my 14-year-old read it, and now I think my niece is even reading it for school. So
Yeah.
his writing is wonderful, really fantastic. Size I have not read, but it is on my list to read.
I must have gotten at least 25 people into it. I swear I do not work for Neil Shusterman. I hope to meet him one day. But it's such an amazing series. The theme of it, the execution of the book, and just about every sentence. Like it feels like it just fits. I don't know how he did it, but in my very biased, okay, opinion, it's the most perfect book in terms of its structure and execution.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing, just to have the writing where it's like, this is good stuff, because it keeps you going, which is a huge thing. And that takes talent, because I'm reading a book right now where I give every book that I read 50 pages. If you can't get me in 50 pages, I'm not going to read the rest of you, but I give you 50 pages. This is one that I think I'm going to get to page 50 and be like, yeah, I'm done. And it's because of the writing. It's not because of the story. The story is great. I think it could have been very well done, but the writing is just so difficult to get through. Like, you can tell they definitely had their thesaurus picked up, and they're using their thesaurus in dialogue. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Oh, but yeah, I'm that one's already on my list, so I don't even have to open up Goodreads and add side to it. It's already there.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. You've written several books. What was that process like? And do you have any favorites of your own that you have written?
Oh my goodness. Honestly, I love writing. I've been a writer since I was about 5 years old. I grew up on fiction, and so I always wanted to be a part of it. And now I specialize in using fiction to help folks understand mental health. And so my books like Harry Potter therapy or supernatural therapy are focused on those fandoms where individuals are able to learn about mental health through their favorite episodes or their favorite chapters, or some kind of an experience within that fandom. And my hope is to speak to essentially the geek community, right? That we're, I think, all a part of, because I think a lot of times it feels like we might not be included in certain conversations, right? And so I've really enjoyed writing those because it allowed me to geek out about both psychology and pop culture. And then I've written a fiction graphic novel, Dark Agents, and that was a lot of fun to write. And it's about a witch with PTSD. And
Oh,
and I just
nice.
Thank you. And I just wanted to show the readers that you could have something really painful happen to you, but A, it doesn't define you, and B, it's not a weakness. And so that's something that I'm trying to help folks understand. I spent many years working with active duty service members, and some time working with veterans as well. And it's something that I found to be really important for people to understand, that our trauma story is an origin story, but it doesn't define who we are. It's the jumping off point, right? But the rest of our journey is up to us.
Yeah. Cody says, first of all, thank you for doing that. That's really important work that you're doing. And I love that, because whenever I talk about my own trauma, like, it really is kind of the beginning part of my story. Even though it didn't happen to me in like childhood, it's still like, that is something that changed what I do in my day to day. And so it's not something that necessarily is celebrated, but it's something that's like, you can point to it and go, this is what happened, this is what happened after. And it's the after part, it's what you do with it that really makes a difference, in my opinion.
Exactly. Thank you, Cody.
So the topic tonight is healing through fiction. So what does that mean, to heal through fiction?
Most of us don't know how to express what we're going through, at least here in the Western world, right? And also, I grew up in Ukraine, and I also wasn't taught how to express what I'm going through. Many of us don't have the vocabulary to explain how we're feeling, and most of us hide behind these kind of socially expected scripts, right? Like the, hi, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I don't know about you, or I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm never fine. Like I'm not fine right now. I'm having a panic attack. I'm sure that I'm doing a terrible job, right? My imposter syndrome is telling me, like she's sitting right here, and and is telling me that I'm messing everything up. And my point is, we don't talk about these things, right? So we
Mhm.
assume that it's just us. I was 12 years old when I moved to the United States. And my family and I had to flee from Ukraine, not only because of what we experienced with Chernobyl radiation, but because of the high rates of anti-Semitism that arose and we were targeted. By the time I was 12, I'd seen violence, I'd experienced abuse. And then starting school in America when I was 12 years old was terrifying. And that whole year, I thought I was weird. I thought there was something wrong with me because I was going through depression and anxiety and PTSD, but I didn't know what those were. And no one talked about it. But then when I was 16, I saw the X-Men, the first one, X-Men 2000, and it changed my life, because it was a fictional story that told the truth. It was a story about how people can be treated when they're seen as other, and I knew what that felt like. And I think a lot of people know what that feels like. And it was more than anything, it was a story about people feeling alone and then connecting together in that aloneness and forming something beautiful. And I was thinking as I was watching it that maybe the fact that we feel alone is like the most unifying factor of them all. Like maybe every single person feels like they don't fit in, but we don't talk about it, right? Like maybe we all think there's something wrong with me when we're going through our own traumas. Not everyone has PTSD, but everyone
Mhm.
has trauma. And maybe if we watch a television show, if we watch a movie, if we read a book, if we play a video game, when we see this fictional narrative, it helps us to understand our own, and it helps us to find a safe place, a safe way to talk about it. Whether we're talking about Dumbledore's death, right? Whether we're talking about like kind of any character that we might be grieving, we can process grief. When we're talking about Batman and what little Bruce Wayne experienced, we can talk about trauma. And I found that every single client that I've worked with, when we brought in fiction, there's something that shifted. Like they were able to say how they felt in terms of describing, let's say, Walking Dead. Like people would say that when I was in Afghanistan, it felt like a scene from The Walking Dead. And that made sense to me and it made sense to them.
Mhm.
And when we can find that way to connect with another human being, that's when healing really starts.
And that's beautiful. I mean, to be able to talk about something in the context of something else. And I think that there's a lot of power in fiction, just to be able to say, like, this is like something that I went through in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's not an exact match, but this is similar. It resonates with me. That's something that's fantastic. And if you can bring that into therapy, that's even better.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then you're bringing in an interest too, right? You're bringing in something that your client already likes, which is great. Going back to something that you said earlier, though, like, you're doing great, we love you, promise. Would you say that all works of fiction have potential to be healing?
I think anything that we connect to has a potential to be healing, whether it's a work of fiction, whether it is a game of Magic the Gathering, whether it's D&D, whether it's a video game. I think anything where we feel like we can connect with either another human being or with a story or with an action, it can give us a sense of purpose. It can give us, this understanding that we're not alone in our experience. So I think absolutely.
Are there any works of fiction that you've ever found to be harmful instead of helpful?
But yeah, that's a great question. And now everyone interprets things differently, right? But I think that there's some works of fiction that stigmatize certain experiences, right?
Yeah.
That might have all villains depicted as, I'm going to use the C word and I don't like it, as crazy, right? I really don't like this word. But they depict villains as having a mental health disorder as an explanation for why they're committing terrible acts. Now, majority of people with a mental health disorder do not commit violent acts. That includes every mental health disorder you can think of, including schizophrenia, including PTSD, you know, both of which are severely pathologized. And so I think that the works that can be harmful are ones that stigmatize certain disorders, ones that caricature certain disorders, because then people who don't have any experience with these assume that this is what it looks like.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can think of a couple movies especially that do that really, really poorly, and just really maybe not cause necessarily measurable harm, but do more harm than they do good.
Yeah.
At what point do you decide with a client, so if you're seeing someone as a client, at what point do you decide they would be receptive or benefit from using superheroes or pop culture or fiction in their treatment plan?
Session 1. And
Nice.
so in the very first session, a part of the evaluation session is the presenting problem. So I ask people what they're hoping to gain from therapy, what are the presenting issues and symptoms. And then the last 10 to 15 minutes of the session are reserved to their pop culture interests. And I'll usually volunteer. It's dark now, so you probably can't see, but I have, you know, action figures. I have Wonder Woman and Black Widow. And, you know, and I'll usually say like, hey, I'm a geek and I love, you know, Harry Potter and Star Wars and Doctor Who and Marvel and DC. And so, you know, what do you like? So I'll usually self-disclose a little bit. And a lot of times the clients will say like, I play Fortnite, or, you know, like I've just binged Loki and it was amazing. And so it's at that point that we kind of like start recognizing, okay, this is something that we can pull some of the strengths from and incorporate into treatment.
Have you ever had a client where it's like they're interested in some sort of pop culture that you haven't heard of before? Do you engage with that? Do you then be like, oh, I'm going to go binge this right now?
Yes and no. So I view myself as a sidekick to my client's journey. And that means that. Thank you. And that means that I believe that it is my job to have my clients learn. It is my job to learn my clients' language. And so, for example, a lot of my clients like anime, and I'm fairly new to anime. And so one of my clients, like a year ago, for example, said that they were a big Demon Slayer fan. And so what I usually use is I try to pull more information, like what character do you relate to? What's the story about? Was there a character that went through something traumatic? And yes, the answer is always yes.
Right.
And then what happened to that character? How did they cope? How did they find their sense of purpose? A lot of times I'll watch 1 or 2 episodes. With Demon Slayer, I accidentally watched all of it. I love it.
Oops.
You know, I watched the whole season. I watched the movie. I have the t-shirt, you know, and a poster. And it's amazing. And you know, and then like King of Tokyo and, you know, and others. So I would say more than 60% of the time, my clients will bring up something I have never heard of. But I believe that it is my job to learn about my client and learn about their culture. And I believe that pop culture is a part of someone's culture. And so it is my responsibility then to understand my client.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex says, thank you for being on the show. And please heal me with one punch. Have you ever had a client say no to using fiction in their healing journey?
Yeah, and some clients prefer traditional therapy, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Do you still try to incorporate any of like the themes from what you would do if they were including fiction or pop culture, and just kind of like slide them in there a little bit? Yeah,
just like a little bit.
Right.
It's sneaky.
Right. I mean, you gotta, because it's all like so with fiction, it's kind of everything follows a general path in a story. And so everyone's life, like it or not, everyone's life also follows a story. And so if you can get their life story and then you incorporate some of those things from these other stories, I think that that's a pretty natural fit, whether they necessarily are gung-ho about it or not. Is there something in particular that makes a hero or a character resonate with someone and kind of be able to support their personal healing journey?
Great question. For a lot of folks, it's when a character went through the same traumatic experience.
Mm.
Not everyone, but for a lot of folks, it's being able to see, like, wow, I went through, let's say, sexual assault, and then Jessica Jones did, right? So for a lot of people who've been through something traumatic like that, Jessica Jones becomes a powerful role model.
Hmm.
And same thing with Buffy, right? In terms of like experiencing some kind of a traumatic loss. For a lot of individuals, seeing somebody who looks like them, that makes a lot of sense, right? That's why we need more diversity. And seeing a character not only of the same skin color, but also of the same sexual orientation, of the same
Hmm.
gender identity, right? I think that when we see more of those characters, more and more people realize that they're not alone. When the Black Panther movie came out, the mental health industry exploded in the most wonderful way. You know, like I had a client come in whose husband died, and she was really worried about her son because he was 6 years old and he was, he was really grieving, understandably. And then she took him to see Black Panther, and so she asked him like what he wanted for his birthday, and he said that he wanted like Black Panther like birthday cake, right? And then when the cake came, he said, you know, Mom, I'm gonna be like T'Challa. I'm gonna be a king. And so like to him it meant so much that, he lost his dad and it was devastating, but being
Hmm.
able to see T'Challa become a king afterwards really meant a lot to him.
Yeah, that's that is something that even my kids really love that movie, and I think that it spoke to
So good.
a lot of people. And I'm always impressed by those movies that feature something that is so um, related to like geeks and geekdom that then is mainstream. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's like, here's a taste of what you've been missing.
Well, I've been saying geek is the new sexy, right? Like
Yeah,
I think we're mainstream now.
I like it. I like it. Alex has a question. He said, have you had a patient that didn't have a fiction element to leverage? And how would you still use this method if that were the case?
So if somebody doesn't like any fictional characters, is that right?
Hmm.
Well, what I typically do with individuals who do like fictional characters, I'll start there and then I promise I'll transition to the other, is that I'll ask the individual to consider maybe something painful they're going through right now, or maybe something painful their younger self went through years ago. And then we'll pull their personal hero, their personal superhero into the room. So I'll ask my client to imagine that, let's say Batman came over right now, and Batman knows everything that that person is going through. And Batman has some kind of encouraging words of support and compassion. For someone that doesn't have this kind of connection to fictional characters, I ask them to think of a personal hero. So this could be maybe a grandparent, right? Even if they're no longer alive. It could be for some people a religious figure. For some people, it's a celebrity, right? For some people, it's a historical figure. But having somebody that people really look up to, having this like kind of imaginal experience of receiving these words of compassion and wisdom can be really moving, whether it's a fictional character or whether it's, a real life human who means a lot to that person.
Yeah. So, oops, let me get that off of there. There we go. How do you go about helping someone become their own hero?
Great question. So, as we go through processing that person's trauma, one of the things we start shifting toward is that person's sense of purpose, right? As in, for instance, if there is going to be a movie about you in, like, say 30 years from now with your origin story, your character, right? Your story, what would you want this movie to be about? Like, what would we see? Not only about the origin story, but also over the next 30 years, right? Like, if anything was possible. And a lot of times people say that, they would want to see a movie about someone that then maybe started helping other people who are going through the same thing, or maybe sharing their story or promoting awareness. And then we look at taking action, right? What does that action look like today? Maybe it looks like you sharing your story on YouTube. Maybe it's texting somebody that you know is going through a hard time. Maybe it's volunteering for a crisis text line, right? And so the idea is that essentially the hero will pass down the torch, right? So Batman will pass down the torch to the person, and then the client in this case would then become their own version of a superhero in real life.
I love that. That's really beautiful. And it's one of those things that it's like, okay, this is something that I want to do. It's something that I can see for myself in the future, but then kind of bringing it back to the present of, right, what's one thing you can do today? That's a really good way to go about it, especially for people like me who are like, oh, I want to have all this stuff happen. And then my therapist is going, okay, what are you doing to work towards it?
But you're doing it now. You're doing it today, right? Like through your streams, you're connecting with your community and you're providing support. You're letting people know they're not alone. You're letting people know that they're heard, right? You're already doing it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Bite Mark has a question, and she asks, what is your favorite poem?
Oh, that's sweet. I think it's by Marianne Williams, and actually I want to pull it up. I want to read a part of it, if it's all right.
Absolutely. I like this trend. The last few guests that I've had, whenever Bite has come on and asked this question, they've read the poem that's their favorite, and I'm like, man, I really like this.
So this is from Marianne Williamson, and here's the part of the poem I really like. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be?
I love that. That's beautiful. I like that a lot. Jamie has a question, and she asks, do you ever have patients use fiction in an unhealthy way? For example, they cope with fiction to avoid addressing feelings. That's a great question, Jamie.
Yeah, that's a great question. That comes up a lot. And not only for fiction, but for other things like video games, for example. And the answer is absolutely yes. We all do that. And my goal as a therapist is not to take anything away, it's to change the function of that behavior. So, for example, when the client says, when I come home from work, I'm so tired, I'm so stressed out, I don't even want to talk to anyone, including my family, so I just binge, this particular TV show, let's say Game of Thrones, right? And then I tell them, well, when you're turning it on, right, when you're putting on Game of Thrones, like, what are you thinking? And they're like, nothing, I just don't want to think. And so I asked them, okay, I'm going to ask you to go home and watch Game of Thrones, right? Like, go ahead, like, watch your favorite episode. But I'm just going to ask you to change how you're looking at it. So I'm going to ask you to tell yourself, I've had a long day, I'm stressed out, I'm going to watch this episode so that I can rest. Right? And so it's interesting that changing that intention changes our relationship with that same behavior, but also changes how we feel afterwards. We see that a lot in procrastination, right? I don't know if you ever procrastinate. I certainly do, right? Whether it's paperwork, right? Schoolwork, reports, right? So a lot of times we'll say, well, I don't really want to do it right now, right? Like, I'm going to watch this TV show. And then as we're watching this TV show, we're not really paying attention. We're feeling really guilty. We're like, I should really be doing my homework. And then because we feel so guilty, we don't want to get to whatever we need to get to. So then we end up binge watching something and feeling really bad the whole time. And so once again, I tell people, if you're going to watch it, do it. Tell yourself, I'm tired. I'm going to watch these 2 episodes. I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it. And then once I'm rested, I'm going to get to my work.
I love that. And that is a definite shift that you have to make consciously at first.
Yes.
And I have been super guilty of procrastination, and also B, looking at it as like, I'll watch something. I'll watch a couple of episodes. I'll watch a couple of episodes of something, and then at the other side of it be like, oh, I could have spent that time doing laundry or doing this or that. And I've had to really work at saying, no, you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to watch this. And you're allowed to take, I was being really hard on myself for sleeping too late on weekends. And so then I started tracking my sleep, and it's like I'm getting 4 to 6 hours during the week. And so that's one of the things that I've been like, no, I'm allowed to sleep for 9 hours on a Saturday because I'm catching up and my body needs that rest. But yeah, that's one of those things that is definitely a conscious mind shift that you have to do. And it's a wonderful thing if you can do it.
Absolutely. I look at it as an investment, right? Self-compassion, which these practices are a way of practicing self-compassion, self-care, self-love. It's an investment in our well-being. And we need to charge our own internal battery so that we can show up to others, for others, right? So if we're getting enough sleep, if we get to watch a few episodes of our favorite show, if we get to play our favorite video game, with that intention, with the intention of resting, we feel better afterwards. We have more energy, more brain capacity, right? It's easier for us to show up. And think about how you treat people. At least I know in my case, I treat people much better when I'm rested and well fed than when I'm sleep deprived and hangry, right? And so all of these activities are all an investment into our well-being so that we are then stronger, better, faster, right? And more powered up.
Yeah, definitely. Jamie also said, procrastinators unite tomorrow.
Now, probably wait.
Yeah, right. We'll see. We'll see. Kevin said, I'm so bad. I always say I'll figure out what I procrastinate on tomorrow and don't have time to deal with it tonight. And that's one of those things that I feel like I've faced as well, just with you hit a point of overwhelm, right? You're like, I'm so overwhelmed. I need to get all these things done, but I'm just not able to do any of them. And then there's there's also kind of the bad thinking or not bad thinking, but the thought pattern of, well, you've already procrastinated this much, you might as well procrastinate another day. You can really kind of spiral with that, which is unfortunate. Yeah. And like I said, it's a big mind shift, but yeah, it's difficult.
Yep, absolutely. For when we have a really long list of things to do, it's important to make sure it's realistic. Like for years, I was beating myself up that I wasn't getting to everything on my list. And then one day I was like, I had enough. I'm going to do the math, right? I'm going to figure out how many hours it's going to take to do all of this. And then I'm going to Tetris it into my day and get it all done, right? And I was all powered up. So I did the math and I figured out that it would take me 3 weeks without sleep. To do everything I had on my list. And, I had to laugh because it was so unrealistic, right? We have these unrealistic expectations of ourselves. So what I typically tell people to do is write out the list, right? Do write the list of things you have to do, because if you don't, then you're going to be waking up from anxiety in the middle of the night or have trouble falling asleep. So do write that list. But then next to each bullet point, write the date when you're going to do it. And if at all possible, I invite folks to not do more than 2 or 3 things per day, right? So if you have 15 things on that list, then spread it out over at least a week, right? But do write that due date, like when you're going to be working on it.
And I'll say one thing that my therapist has said for me that's particularly helpful. If you really like checklists, and you have to really like checklists for this to be effective, I think. But she said also put at least one thing on there that you're not going to do. So you can wake up and say, I'm not going to run a marathon today. Check. I didn't do it. I've already checked one thing off my list. I put my feet on the floor. I'm done with one thing. That's it.
Nice.
So just to kind of get that momentum and get yourself checking things off your list. Definitely. Jamie said, I procrastinate in part because I fear failure. I think that's not an uncommon thing.
Pretty universal, I would say, right? And the thing is that the expectation is that somehow if we don't do something to maybe somebody else's standards or our own impossibly high standards, then immediately means that we're a failure, right? We evaluate our self-worth by achievement, instead of by our actions. But the thing is, you're not your achievement, you're your actions, right? You're all the wonderful things that you do for your community. You are the figure of compassion, right? You're the figure of kindness. That's what we're evaluated by. And what I want to point out is that every time we're struggling with like overwhelm and anxiety, right? Like the not good enoughness, it's essentially like facing a dragon. You ever like watch one of those movies where somebody's like either fighting dragons or fighting like a whole bunch of bad guys? Like Black Widow did it. Like, she'll be like fighting with one hand and then talking on the phone with another. Well, in another way, in a lot of ways, that's what every single one of you does, right? So like you'll be fighting off your anxiety monster, your huge anxiety dragon with one hand, and then somehow still like either brushing your teeth or doing your schoolwork or, your report for work with another. And so it might feel like you're procrastinating, but like, holy cow, you're still slaying dragons. And that's pretty impressive.
I love that analogy. That's amazing. Cody said, check out the Habitica. Oh, Habitica. Okay, so we had a group in Discord who was talking about maybe starting to use Habitica together to do the quests and stuff, but it kind of just fizzled out. I guess people weren't super interested. But yes, Habitica is a really cool app, and I really like the way that it takes the things that you have to do and makes it into kind of a quest, which appeals to myself.
Gamify it.
Absolutely. Everything is gamified these days. We talked with long time ago. We talked about gamification in life on this show, and it was just one of those things that we talked about. Even Kroger, the grocery store, is gamified things for their customers. Like literally, your gas station is gamifying things to get you to earn points to do things. Like everything is gamified these days, and to have something like Habitica where it is clearly gamified on purpose and to get that higher engagement, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, totally.
Not sponsored, but call me. Are there any works of fiction you find yourself leaning on with clients repeatedly?
Avengers come up a lot. X-Men come up a lot. Batman comes up a lot. Harry Potter comes up a lot. Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, those come up quite a bit. Those are probably the most common ones that people bring in and come in with. And then I'm starting to see a lot of different kinds of anime, which I'm starting to, now watch and learn more about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that you wrote some books that had Supernatural in the title. Is that Supernatural the series or like just generally super? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's
Love
Supernatural, the series. That's, if you want to be a hunter like Sam and Dean, the book is essentially how to become a hunter, like how to hunt your own mental health monsters.
Oh, that's really cool. I like that. I like that a lot. If you guys haven't checked out any of her books, let me just post at least this website real quick, and you can go and look. There's a long list of them, and check any of them out you want to check out. Are there any regular habits that either you maintain yourself or that you encourage your clients to develop that you feel like don't get enough attention but that support overall well-being?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, I think like checking in on other people is something, I think we started talking more about during the pandemic, but when we check on other people, we might remember that external focus, right? We might remember that our actions make a difference. And it allows us to remember that we are important, that we do make a difference. And I think that for people that are struggling, especially people that are struggling with depression and loneliness, that's a really important task.
Yeah, absolutely. Bite says, can I be a hunter not like Sam and Dean? They have apocalypse level trouble too often.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So Fee sent this question in ahead of time. She asks, what is your day-to-day experience like as a therapist? And what was your experience like when you were in school to become one?
Oh, great questions. I think I'm really lucky in that my day-to-day is completely different from one day to another. I think that I kind of crave things to be like a little bit kind of more dynamic. I don't really like routines. And so I get to talk to different people, which is really exciting, right? So whether it's different clients, whether it's, different streams and different podcasters, I get to write, which is really exciting. I get to play tag with my cats, which is a lot of fun. And so I think that's kind of the day to day. It's it's nerdy and fun, and and then there somewhere in there there's catching up on the latest whatever whatever show my partner and I are binging that week. And my experiences in school, interesting. So when I was I don't know how to quite veer into it. So my first PhD was in neuroscience, and I remember thinking like, I love the brain so much, but I don't know how to talk about it and what to do with like everything I wanted to do. And so I felt a little bit like I didn't quite fit in. I was so excited to learn it though, right? So then after I finished that, then I switched to clinical, and it just fit. Like I felt like coming home. Like I just felt like I was learning about the things I wanted to be learning, and everything in my mind was translating in pop culture. So I remember learning about physiology and anatomy and biofeedback and how all that works, right? And in my mind, I'm like, holy cow, that is the hero's journey. And, and just, I remember everything just translating, right? Like seeing things as like mindfulness and like, oh, they're talking about the force, and just things making sense to me in that kind of light. And it felt safe and lovely. And I think when you find your passion and that's what you go to study, it feels like Hogwarts.
That's a lovely, lovely analogy. Cody said, "I'm liking clinical. Haven't started on my on-premise stuff yet."
I think you're gonna love it and have a wonderful time, Cody.
Yeah, it sounds like if it clicks, I mean, that's one of those things that I fell into my profession on accident. But once I started doing what I do, like I was like, this is my bag. This is what I'm good at. This is what I understand. This is what I'm going to do. And I never looked back. Like I never took a second to be like, well, is this what I really want to do with my life? Because I was just like, no, I'm great at this. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm good at. Cody also asks, let me pop this on the screen here. Have you ever tried EMDR, amazing for PTSD?
Yes, it is. And actually, yes, I am now doing EMDR with my clients, and you're right. It is wonderful for PTSD. Definitely very impressed with it.
Is there something in particular that makes it effective for PTSD?
What like the neuroscientist in me is like lighting up as we're talking about this.
Teach us.
The cool thing, right, about EMDR is that it allows us to reactivate things that got accidentally paired together during trauma and unpair them and learn something new, right? So when something traumatic happens, let's say somebody gets robbed on a certain street, or somebody experiences a car accident on a certain street, when they're on that street next, they're going to feel unsafe, right? And they're going to engage in like fight, flight, or freeze response. And the message that gets ingrained is this particular situation is unsafe, when actually that particular intersection had nothing to do with what happened, right? And so what EMDR does is that it takes that particular experience, it kind of activates it, right? So the person is invited to think about a particular memory and maybe a particular thought that they formed. For example, a memory of being left alone as a child, maybe home alone, and thinking I'm unsafe or nobody loves me. And then doing the specific bilateral stimulation. So usually it's eye movements, but sometimes it can be tapping or drumming. That's my favorite. And what it does is that it actually brings up the neural stimulation that can then become unpaired. And so then we can pair that same event, right, that same memory of whether it's the car accident or being left home alone in these examples, with a new thought, right? With a new belief, a more helpful one. For example, like this situation was dangerous, but the street is not dangerous, right? Or for example, I am lovable, right? I might have been left home alone at that point, but I am lovable. And so I think that this kind of therapy is really cool because it gets at the neural activation, like right at the root, and then allows everything else to propagate down.
That's really, really neat. There was a story on NPR not too long ago that was about a medication paired with EMDR, that they took this medication, did some EMDR, and it was like someone with severe arachnophobia.
Yeah.
And then they wound up by the end of it, and this was like within days, so that's not the typical EMDR experience. Like, I completely understand that this is a particular story of an individual, but he was able to hold a tarantula at the end of it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
and
really cool.
it's a like research clinical studies medication that they're still working on and all of that, but the story was just really cool. But EMDR was a big part of that because it was just all right, you're going to take this medication, we're going to talk through it, we're going to do some EMDR stuff, and then the next day you're going to come back, you're going to sleep. It was sleeping in between, and the next day you're going to come back and you're going to hold a spider.
So cool. Speaking of spiders, there was a study that came out in 2019 that found that watching Spider-Man can reduce arachnophobia.
Really? That's pretty cool.
So, if Ron Weasley ever met Spider-Man, I wonder.
Is that because it's just exposure to spiders are cool kind of material, or yeah?
I think so, right? Because it is an exposure, right? It's being able to see a spider, and there are little spiders too, not just Spider-Man, as a safe environment, right? Where nothing bad happens.
Yeah, that's really neat. Bite says my therapist has little hand buzzers for EMDR. It's pretty good stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, the buzzers, sometimes it's lights. There are so many cool different gadgets for it. Yeah.
That's really neat.
Cool.
Okay, well, it is time for the magic moment. Uh-oh. My wand is stuck. I have a magic wand for this section. And I'm going to wave this magic wand. It's magical powers. And when I wave it, you get to eliminate one common opinion, misconception, or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health. So I'm going to wave this wand, and then you get to tell us what you're going to eliminate today.
I am going to eliminate the idea that if people are struggling with mental health anything, it means that there's something wrong with them. Majority of people struggle with something. And in majority of cases, it is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. So whether we're feeling lonely, depressed, angry, frustrated, it is a normal reaction to an abnormal event.
Absolutely. There's the statistic that's out there. I think NAMI puts the statistic out. I'm not sure. It might be someone different, but there's a statistic out there that says that 1 in 2 adults will struggle with a mental illness, or will experience a mental illness, or be impacted by a mental illness at some point in their lives. So that 1 in 2, like, put 5 people in the room, and more than half of them are going to have similar experiences. And so it's kind of, we all going back to what you said earlier, we all feel like we're alone, and really none of us are alone in this.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to open it up to any more remaining community questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them into chat, and then I'll just open it up to you as well and see if there's anything we didn't cover, anything additional you want to throw out there as far as resources or sites or personal recommendations, and I'll throw out your socials one more time in the chat, but I'll just open it up to you for a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I encourage people to speak out about your experiences, because I think that a lot of times certain movies or TV shows do such a poor job of representing it. One of the biggest misrepresentations is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Most people think that OCD refers to hand washing or being clean or neat or organized. And although it can look like that for some people, a lot of individuals don't have those symptoms. For other individuals who have OCD, it might be intrusive thoughts, and they might be really terrifying intrusive thoughts. For example, some people with OCD might have thoughts like, what if I end up harming someone? What if I did harm someone, but I forgot? What if I'm actually a child molester? And people think that having these thoughts means that they're a bad person, when no, in fact, it doesn't. It most likely means that there might be some kind of an undiagnosed anxiety disorder or an obsessive disorder. And I think that if more people knew that what they're going through is A, normal, and B, there's somebody that can help them with that, they would be more willing to reach for help. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that if you're somebody that struggles with something and you think there's no one else, see if there is a way that you can share it. And if you don't feel comfortable putting your name on it, share it anonymously. But chances are there are other people who are going through the same thing, feel very alone, and reading about your experiences will allow them to know that they're not alone themselves.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for a place to do that, besides in the Discord, but the heart support forums, let me see if I can get those. What is it? Oh, dang it. The heart support forums, if you aren't familiar with those, are really, I can't spell today. Support. There we go. Oh, okay. Well, it's not, my command isn't working, so I'll have to go find let me grab the link really quick. But the heart support forums are a great way to do that. You can do it anonymously. You can get support through there. And also there are other peer support websites. That's just my favorite one. And it's a fantastic place to go and to share what you're going through and get some feedback from people who have been there too. Bite said, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. This has been fascinating and educational. Yeah.
Thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for spending your time with us tonight. Okay, chat, give me just a minute. I'm going to disconnect with our guest here, and I will be back playing some Minion Masters and RuneScape, so don't go anywhere. And thank you again for being willing to join us today.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap on today's episode, folks. I hope you enjoyed diving into the world of healing through fiction with myself and Janina Scarlet. It's incredible to think about the impact that stories can have on our lives, from providing comfort during tough times to inspiring us to be our own heroes. Fiction has a way of touching our hearts and minds in ways we never expected. As we reflect on our conversation, I encourage you to take a moment to think about the stories that have shaped your own journey. Maybe there's a book that helped you through a difficult time, or a movie that inspired you to keep pushing forward. Whatever it is, know that your experiences matter and that you're not alone in your struggles. I mentioned at the beginning, but we've got a great community here. And if you want to connect, make sure that you reach out. Go to our tacosfallapart.com website, or find me on socials at MommaFoxFire, and I'll help get you connected in whatever way you want to be connected. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to hear more conversations like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and review the show. Your support means the world to me and helps me reach even more people who may need a little extra encouragement and inspiration in their lives. And all of those things will help you make sure that you know when the next episode comes out. So until next time, remember that even tacos fall apart sometimes, but that doesn't make them any less delicious. Keep taking care of yourselves and each other, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Stay strong, stay brave, and keep shining bright.